Okay.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, Bonnie.
Kirk,
I
brother.
I'm a little late. My computer died overnight, and of course I overslept through my
Oh,
alarm. I
that's okay.
it's
I
dumb.
understand. I've had those moments. No problem.
Oh my goodness. How are you?
Did you get your cup of coffee? Do we need to wait five
I have
minutes
a
while you
cup of
get your cup of
coffee,
coffee?
and look at
Good.
the mug, Bonnie. Here.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God, that is you in another life. I love Bob Ross. He's amazing. Too bad you can't get him on your show.
I
If
know.
you ever
You-
need a pick me up, you just click on the YouTube, and there's no such thing as a bad painting. It's just a happy little
That's
accident.
right. I love it. Actually, I could probably do a show with me and then my impression of Bob Ross.
You could. You need a little more fro going, but you're pretty close.
I know. I had the haircut. Yeah. My guess. Wait. So, what? First of all, do I still call you Auntie La, or do I call you by your formal name?
Well, whatever you like. It's kind of confusing. I like Anila. Anila means kind of like venerable nun.
Uh-huh.
But the thing is, in Tibetan culture, Ani also means aunt. And there's a kind of a
Oh.
PC movement, which I'm not these days. When I was younger, I was all into the PC language and all this, but mostly I just think it has to do when people have a respectful attitude. Within the culture now, they say, no, 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 we need a whole new word for nun because Ani means auntie, and we don't want to be, compared to someone's auntie. We want some respect because traditionally in the culture of Tibetan Buddhism, nuns haven't had that. So there's a kind of shift now away from using Anila to Tsunma. Tsunma means lady of honor, of virtue,
Hmm.
kind of a woman of virtue, but it's used for a nun. My ordination name, I like a lot, Dasel.
That's well.
Dasel. And that la at the end is also very nice. That's just like a respectful, instead of just using like a name like, oh, Dasel, it's kind of showing this respect that you would show to someone in the robes. So I like Dasel la. People have been saying Dasel la. We're not supposed to call ourselves that because it could be a
Uh-huh.
little bit egotistical, but um, I think Dasela is good. That's okay.
Dasela. Okay. Auntie. I mean, I feel like say auntie is respectful too. I respect my aunties.
But the thing is, in our culture, it's different. Here it's like the monks had so much more status and so much more respect, and they had monasteries to live in. And if people see them, they're offered everything. They're offered money. They're offered robes. They're offered foods. And the nuns were just had no nunneries. They were kind of sent home. It was like the domestic servants working in the gardens and the fields, worse than servants because they weren't even paid. And it didn't really come into people's minds that the nuns and monks were equally upholding the Dharma. So there was a little bit of that, sexism at play. And it still is. India is still trying to catch up from that. So,
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
you are.
that's why I think Anila is very sweet sounding and easy to say. And people in the States and other places still call and use that. But because the nuns here are kind of shifting to Tsunma, I said, well, why don't I just use my ordination name from His Holiness? Because Dasel is a beautiful word from two Tibetan words. Dawa means moon, and Selpo means clear. So it really means like clear moon or clear light mind, like this very pure mind. So that's also very lovely.
That is, and clear moon. There's plenty clear moons here in Maine. There, dear.
I
Huh?
know, brother. I'm missing, but we get some good ones also. We put a telescope up on the roof of the temple, and I've been teaching the younger nuns some astronomy. So we've been having some fine. We were up there for the that event that happened, the alignment of the
Oh yeah,
Uranus, no, Jupiter,
Jupiter, Saturn.
Saturn. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jupiter, Saturn.
Mhm.
We were up there checking it out, and we've gotten some really good views of the moon surface with the telescope, and it's blowing the nuns' minds. Even the Kempo, the head of the college here, he came up. He's like, "Is it for real? Is it for real?" It's like, yeah, that's the surface of the moon.
That's pretty cool. Wait, now, so okay,
So
you're in India. Are you in Dharmasala, or where are you?
nearby, I'm a little bit about an hour and a half away from there in the same area of Himachal Pradesh, which is beautiful mountain region. It's right at the foothills of the Himalaya, so we can look out and still see the snow peaks. But we're in a big valley, so Dharamsala is up in the mountains, so it's quite cold up there in the winter and then very wet during the monsoon. And we're in this beautiful valley, like we're already in springtime now. We don't have any heaters in our I know, my sister said that too. I was showing her like the flowers that we've gotten.
Oh,
We don't have any heaters in our rooms. The older people, myself included, have little space heaters, but the nuns have nothing. So some days it's like 42 degrees outside and 41 or 40 inside because the concrete building holds the cold. And I don't know how they push through that, but they do. So they had about 3 weeks worth of that kind of weather, but now it's kind of in the 60s, low 70s in the day and kind of high 50s overnight. So it's good, it's
oh my
spring.
gosh. Wait, what's the elevation? So you're in a valley, so.
We're kind of in a valley, but still we're in the Himalayas. So our elevation here, I think, is something like, I don't know, maybe 3,000 or 4,000.
Oh, so not bad.
Not much, but when you go up to the McLeod, up to Dharamsala, you're more at like 10.
Okay,
so
so I mispronounced it. I
up.
said Dharmasala. It's Dharamsala. Dharamsal. How do you say it?
Dharamsala. Some people say Dharamshala. Anyway, I get the sense of what you're talking about. It's close enough. Dharamshala.
I try.
Yes, you do. That's all we can do. We try. We know we say 3 things: intention, motivation, and dedication. So you have the right intention and you have the right motivation. You're trying to show respect, and that's the right dedication. So that's all you need.
Well,
Positive
I'll take it.
state of mind. Yes.
I'll take now. So so tell me about your the center, the Buddhist center in Maine that you're considering
yes.
starting.
Yes, that is our dream. So Tashi Gatsel Ling, our little community, has been around in Maine since about 2000, and it wasn't called that then. It was just my teacher, Ken Rinpoche, who Adrian met.
Yeah.
We used to meet in my friend's artist studio in Freeport, and then we had so many people coming. Some other family came up from Arlington, Massachusetts, and leased this beautiful farmhouse that had a big yoga studio in the back out in Pownell. So we shifted, and that's when we became Tashi Gatsel Ling. Our teacher gave our community a little name, and we started running it as a group of 8, lay women practitioners, and my friend Mayor's husband, Troy, who's awesome. But we were mostly a group of ladies. And so they had the space, and that's where we were there for a few years. And then they moved away. And so someone sponsored a studio in Freeport. So we had a nice big space in Freeport. And when Ken Rinpoche used to come, sometimes we'd have 30 to 40 people. So we needed a bigger space. And that worked out well for a few years. But that monthly rent was quite high. We were right on Route 1 in Freeport. So it was a great location, but we were renting it and it became untenable. So then my friends in Gray, where we're located now, said, look, we've finished building this new salt box. And Cole, my friend who was building the house, built in this beautiful big room that can comfortably seat like 20 people. So we shifted, and then we didn't have to pay rent. So we shifted the center there. Now, in the meantime, coming back, that's kind of our capacity is like 20, 25 at most, because it's not that big. But over the last few years, we've done some retreats, and we've thought like what Maine would really benefit from would be to have like a Buddhist center that could be used for more ongoing functions that could hold comfortably like 80 people, and that could incorporate some Buddhist ideals like environmental harmony and be off the grid, be heated with solar and warmed with solar power. Excess solar could go back into the grid to support clean energy. We could have a beautiful organic flower gardens, maybe organic greenhouse, grow some fresh food to give to the food shelters, have a healing flower garden where people who were going to visit sick ones, or if people's loved ones had passed away, they could come and actually could have part of the garden where they could cut live flowers and spend time and just ground. So this kind of a beautiful functional Buddhist center that would really be an asset to the community. This is my vision, because His Holiness the Dalai Lama is really encouraging us to make Buddhism practical. And, basically that means using the secular approach, not so much the religious approach. There can be definitely aspects from the aspect of having a monastic like myself who's completely ordained, committed to the vows, holding pure ethics, and the morality of all that, celibacy, no drinking, no drugging, nothing, that's our full commitment, no marriage. So that my whole practice is in service of the Buddha Dharma, but having it be more of a community-based center where, you know, people who are really needing support these days to come and sit in meditation together, to listen to some practical advice about, well, what did the Buddha say about dealing with, you know, anger and frustration, or about sadness and depression, and how do Buddhist monks and nuns live without, you know, looking for these kind of personal relationships or using sexuality, or how do Buddhist monastics live without taking any alcohol or taking any drugs. There are a lot of positive aspects of our lifestyle that others can do. It's not, you know, we're just human beings. We're nothing special. Maybe just the haircut.
Absolutely.
But you know, there are practical aspects of Buddhism that have much more to do with secular values like non-harming. In the Indian language, ahimsa, what Gandhi founded his whole movement on was non-harming, non-violence. That has to do with your body, with your speech, with your mind, with compassion, with karuna. How do you meet the challenges when people are being aggressive and when the world feels so adverse? How do you come into that with compassion and keep your own view very clean, clear, and pure? And so there's some really good benefits. And, you know, when I've come back to me and I've done things in the schools with high school students and at the university, before I came to India to ordain, I used to go to Long Creek to the Youth Incarceration Center for 4 years. I ran meditation programs there for the incarcerated girls, and then the boys asked for it. And so both unit, you know, the couple of the units there. And then of course, kind of interfaith work and going to hospitals. So the vision is to have this Tashi Gatsel Ling Buddhist Center be an eco-dharma center. So we uphold the concepts of non-harming, pure ethics, pure compassion, loving kindness in a very living way that would actually be a resource for the community at large, and also for people from around the country, because, you know, this idea was germinating pre-COVID, but even more so now, the US is really in need of some really strong programming that will help people move forward with loving kindness, with compassion, with ethics, and in the direction that's beneficial to everybody, that has not much to do with Buddhism, but from our practice as Buddhists, that we want to give back, you know, to our brothers and sisters. It's not about converting anyone to Buddhism. That it doesn't work that way. Buddha never encouraged that, but he did encourage to go out in the community and to be of service to the community in very practical ways. So this is the vision. And as you know, Maine is beautiful, and we have so many beautiful natural resources just in the landscape of Maine, the open-heartedness of Maine, our Maine life, life is the way, Maine is the way life should be. This kind of attitude that's welcoming Portland as a resettlement city, and its commitment to natural resources and preservation and good living. So we're trying now to do this as also with dana in the spirit of generosity, which means we don't want to, some centers have raised millions of dollars and bought these parcels of land and done these amazing transformations of old buildings and things like that, which is wonderful. But our vision is more to try to look for donations, like look for some donation of land, 5 to 8 acres at the most, not more than that. It could even be a little bit less. And to look for donated resources, to look for donated, whether that's money, monetary gifts, or materials, green building, partnering with green builders who would, maybe help us by reducing the charge, whatever we can do. I haven't approached the shelter project up in Woolwich, but they have some kind of projects and thoughts of, going to Casco Bay where they have hands-on teaching kids how to do green building, saying, look, maybe you want to come here. We've got this project. If you give the resources, this could be a project for your students to learn. I mean, we don't want it to be, we want it done really nicely and right, but that we'll trust that their teacher is going to oversee it, and that this is a way that they could have an opportunity to actually work on a project. So to really keep it grounded in the community that way.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot. Well, first of all, Ani, I love your intention and motivation
And
in the
dedication.
and dedication in the project. I feel like the programming and the sort of the gifts it would give back to folks in the community, and the education that it would provide would be really beneficial. So it sounds like there's a couple of different ways to go about the funding of it, right? And so that you're thinking of, which I didn't even think of before, but sort of an individual donations, or some philanthropic folks. And then I don't know if these other centers have organizational or like foundational grants that help get them off the ground or whatnot. But then I also love the idea of having the like building companies and or schools and whatnot sort of have a part of their education as well. But what's your take on sort of the combination of all those funding?
Yeah, that's kind of how we've approached it. And a long time ago, in another life iteration in this lifetime, I was a grant writer. So I've already said to our board of directors, we have a small board of directors, and we're looking for people who can bring talents. Like you came to mind because I know you were successful in getting your own company going. And so I thought, well, I don't really know much about that and about angel investors and people who would do things like that. But we have so many different angles going on that, it is an opportunity for people who want to support something that's not just an investment in, say, like green energy. We also kicked around the idea of trying to invest in like a small solar farm, things that people could see that it would be very practical and that they might want to come in and just say like, look, yes, you're going to do that part, but we're going to support your bigger vision. But yes, we signed up for like the Maine Nonprofit Association and the Grant Station. And so we are starting to research like what other kinds of startup money can we pull together in terms of grants or foundation gifts. But we need some help. I mean,
Yeah.
My friends are a little bit retired and senior and they're doing great. And one other younger woman, but she's working full time, and I'm over here in India. So we're having meetings a couple times every few months. But, my feeling now is like during this period of COVID, it's our chance to kind of identify some sources and then get some good pitch together, and then really make that pitch and get the word out there. Like, this is what we're trying to do. Some years back, I did an interview with Maine Magazine, like to follow up with them and say, look, can you help me broadcast this idea and get it out there? And
that would be great. I mean, you just gave a great pitch, Ani. It was awesome.
I'm glad you're recording it, brother, because you
absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna put it out on the airwaves.
Gotta help me get the word out there. Yeah. That's what I need.
We'll put it out. We'll put it out on the podcast airwaves.
Yeah, I'm a believer that when you really have the vision, and all my friends have often said, like, you're great at manifesting. And I guess if I think of it that way, I have a friend who's an artist who had I think she still has a website, and I love the title of it. It's called Prayers Made Visible. And I think if you think of prayer as like this really amazing altruistic intention, that's what prayer is, this amazing altruistic wish and belief that we're not doing anything solely by the power just singularly of ourselves, but that we're working in harmony and in concert with much greater forces, then these things can happen. And I can even say, from when I first came to Maine in 1984, to see all the changes that the state has already gone through, and yes, there are still big challenges, but believe me, from now looking back to the 80s, it's in so much of a better place than it was. And I think it can continue to go that way. And even Maine's, the motto of the state of Maine is Dirigo, which means I lead, and there's an old expression says, as Maine goes, so goes the country. And if we can take that spirit of, New England kind of can-do resolve. If you can get through a Maine winter, you can do anything.
That's
actually. Right. Those poor Texans, they have no idea.
Oh my gosh.
They're just meeting it for the first time.
Yeah.
But we can do it. And it's kind of this idea that there's so many opportunities right now. In Einstein said, in the midst of difficulty lies great opportunity. And in my own life, that's been so true. Like when the hardest knocks have come, it's been like, okay, well, now what can we make out of this?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and so that's how I'm thinking of this in Maine. Like, you know, at first we're thinking like, my friend Cole, he's from New Hampshire, but he's been in Maine for his whole life. But he says, you know, I don't want to be a downer about this, Annie, but we're talking a lot of money. I was like, you know, it could be a couple million, but actually in the bigger scheme of things, that's not a lot of money. You know, like it's out there. People are blowing it on far less creative, beautiful visions. And we've got to just believe if we hold it, then we're going to draw the support.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm not saying it's a small amount of money, but in the grant world and what the resources that people put towards other things, we could do a really good project for that amount. And
Sure.
I believe we could, you know, raise that towards this. So.
Yeah, and that, you know, sort of the you could raise it on the value of what the center is going to provide, and there will be folks. I feel like there would be folks interested in supporting that vision and providing that to the community, and it could become a place where people will come to from obviously outside of Maine to, you know,
Exactly. So yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's the vision, is to kind of start with the main building of the center. That would just be very simple. That we had an Indian lady who's an architect who's now green certified and trained, and she works for a small architect firm in Portland. She already designed the whole plan for us. She did it for free. So this is the idea, like this whole pro bono kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then what I said to her is, what I would like to see eventually is like, then kind of a wraparound deck coming off of it, and then off of the deck, individual yurts where people could come and do retreat, so that they would come maybe for teachings, and then they could do longer retreat, and or yes, it would be a place where people could come for programs to the center, but then they'd stay at like B&Bs in the area. But it would also bring economic benefit by bringing people from outside of Maine to Maine, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, even now I have people around the world who I'm connected with who eventually, when we get past this stage, will want to come and visit to our country. And so that's part of the other aspect of, you know, supporting locally and then bringing in others to enjoy the beauty of Maine, to enjoy the center, and then to also support the economy, which will be good for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I will just think about some folks or orgs or foundations that might be
good. Thank you.
with, and even sort of business folks that, you know, in the industry, sort of building and whatnot. And I'll try to make some connections if I can figure that out. So yeah, that sounds great.
So anyone you know who's doing solar, anyone you know who's doing green building, I think there's a company, small group in Freeport who's specializing. I've Googled, you know, I've done a little basic research around Maine to look. But anyone who comes to mind, I'm happy to have your help, and very appreciative to have your help. So thank you.
You bet. Yeah,
great.
Cool.
Great.
Well, I also wanted to hear more of your story, Ani, about, you know, first of all, I didn't know that you were not you're from away, as they say here in Maine. You said you came to Maine in '84, but then I wanted to kind of hear a little bit more about your journey to becoming a Buddhist nun, you know, from your early days as a college basketball player with my wife Adrienne. As
you can get a good backstory from Adrienne about that for sure. But yes, I'll give you the truth.
She said, you know, Lisa was kind of a partier back in the day.
Oh yes. Which makes me a very good Buddhist teacher, because there are no flies on me. I just said that to my sister this morning. I said, I can never take the holier than thou position, because there are too many people in my life who I'm still very closely connected with that would, you know, always have to keep me humble right away. So that's very true. As a matter of fact, probably I was one of the earliest people. Adrienne was a freshman when I was a senior at Bates. I was her captain, and as a freshman, I was probably one of the first people that she had a little underage drinking party with, I have to admit. But, you know, that was the 80s. That's what was going on. So I'm not going to try to pretend it wasn't.
You showed up to campus and you gave her like a beer bong or something?
Oh, I don't think it was that. No, I was actually for that, I was and Adrian can verify this. Our first party that we had when we were doing our training in about November, once the team had been formed, Adrian and Amy Schrag was a freshman. They actually went on to both become All-Americans. There are a couple other. Tara Schiffman was a freshman. She was the younger sister of my good friend Rick Schiffman, who was my class at Bates. There were a bunch of freshmen, and I said, look, I don't want anyone to overdo it. But then there was a junior who was not a captain, but she got in her head, you gotta drink it. And I was like, stop that. That is not true at all. Don't listen to her. So it was funny because Amy Schrag still remembers that. She's like, I don't know what got into Carol's mind about that, but you were like putting her, you know, keeping her in check. Anyway, we have, you know, what happens at the Bates women's basketball party stays at the Bates women's basketball parties. No, I was never like, you have to do any kind of shots and things like that. But, you know, we did have some, we had some quarters games, and everyone had to kind of take care of herself. I don't think it ever got too much out of control.
Yeah.
But we had some good times. We had a great time that year. I mean, as I said, Adrian and Amy went on to be All-Americans. I never made it quite that high, but they always said, you know, that was their most fun year. But it wasn't like you had, you know, because you were an athlete too. You can't do too much of it because then you don't perform. And
absolutely.
The year before I came to Bates, my freshman year, so I'll back up and tell you where. Yes, I'm from away, but I'm a New England girl. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, and loved where I grew up was called, you know, the Happy Valley, the Pioneer Valley of Western Mass. So I was growing up in South Hadley, Mass, where Mount Holyoke is. And then my parents divorced when I was young, and then my mother remarried and we moved to Holyoke. And Holyoke's interesting because it's considered the birthplace officially of volleyball, but technically it was where Dr. James Naismith developed basketball and volleyball. But Springfield, Massachusetts gets credit for the birthplace of basketball. Holyoke gets the credit for volleyball, but the same person developed both sports. And he developed basketball in particular for women, for female college athletes. The first game of basketball was officially played at Smith College. And they didn't have hoops, and it was used literally with peach baskets. That's why you often see basketball festivals saying the Peach Basket Festival. And so ever since I was born, that I can remember going to my neighbor's house. We didn't have a hoop where I was, but he had a hoop in his driveway, and my grandmother had one, and she lived only a street away. And even when I was 5, I was throwing the ball up there, and I loved it. And so as I grew, I always wanted to play. And when we moved to Holyoke, there was some organized leagues of the Girls Athletic League. I think I was about 11 or 12 when we moved to Holyoke. When I was 10 in South Hadley, I'd played on the boys' baseball team because this was back in the 70s. There were no girls' teams. So my mother, for some reason, she wasn't really that progressive politically or feminist. I don't think but she let me try out. And so I made the boys baseball team. I played baseball. And then in 8th grade, growing up in Holyoke, one of my friends said to me, hey, I want to try out for the boys basketball team. I said, no, Renee, you don't want to be the only girl on a boys team. I did that in baseball. I said, your teammates, if you can play, might be nice too, but the other boys and their parents are really mean. It's like, it was really even the 70s like that. I mean, you kind of think like, who's yelling at a girl, like whose parents are yelling at a little girl who's doing her best to play. Oh yeah, more than the players. Yeah,
what?
Not nice. So anyway, I said, but I'll go and I'll give you support. You know, we'll try out. And at that point, people, like, we had played in this girls' athletic league and we played on the weekends, and so everyone I had a game. You know, I had a little game, and so we went.
I got game.
I had some game. So we went to try out, and it was 28 boys and 2 girls. And on the first day of tryouts, it was a Monday. And this coach was so cool, Kirk. He looked like John Lennon. This is like in 78. He had the little glasses, and he was just very mellow. And he just came and he lined us all up, and he said, you know, blew his whistle, before we start, this is how it's going to be. today there are 30 of you. By Wednesday, I'm going to cut down to 15. And by Friday, I'm cutting down to 10. And it's going to be the 10 best players that make this team. That's all he's ever said about it. He didn't say the girls can't try out. That's it. And so we started to go for it. And I was like, hey, you know, I think I have a good chance here. And a lot of the guys I knew because I had gone to like elementary school with, but my junior high was bigger. It was a feeder school. So you had all these kids coming up from like different parts of the city, that the African-American kids and the Puerto Rican kids. And then the part of the city I lived in were more like the white bread kids. So we were converging, but, you know, 7th grade, we had already done gym together. So as one of my friends who I saw at one of my high school reunions, he said, you know, it would have been different if you sucked, but you could play. So we wanted you, you know, like it wasn't like we took you because we thought, okay, because we need at least one girl, let's support her. They said, no, we knew that you could play. So by Wednesday, my friend had been cut from the team and my stepbrother and I were still going. And he said, look, just keep going for it. Basketball's always been your sport. Baseball's been mine. And then by Friday morning, the list of the team got posted and it was a boys team. It was a boys freshman, like boys freshman varsity team that traveled all around Western Mass. My junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And I was in 8th grade, but they're at the top, you know, near the top of the list after the first boy's name. That last name alphabetically was Lisa Blake, you know? And so everyone around the school was like, Lisa Blake made the boys team. It was like this big flash. Before I knew it, like the local newspapers were coming and they're you know, people's parents of the boys who got cut were calling the school, hey, you can't let a girl take a boy's place. But they looked into it. What was interesting was the school was like, oh, maybe we can't. But when they looked into it, the school and all of the school districts in Western Mass were in violation because Title IX had passed in 1972. And it said, if you have an organized sports program for boys, you have to, by rights, have an equal opportunity one for girls. And if you don't have it, you have to let the girls play with the boys if they can.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that year I played with the boys. But the next year they instituted, which I was a little bummed about because I was out of the 10, I was about 7th. I wasn't a starter, but I thought, oh, I'm only in 8th grade. By next year, I'll be a starter. And I developed a good jump shot. I had the behind the back dribble going the boys helped me. They taught me, you know, my game got better. So I was like, yeah, I want to keep playing with them because it's much harder than, and this was like before they even started with the smaller ball for the girls. So it was like full on stuff. And
well, then you were a point guard in college, right?
Not really. I was always a swing guard.
Okay.
I was a little too, you know, ball handling. I had some skills, but I was much better in the swing because I wasn't afraid to go in for rebounds, but I had that outside shot. So it was better to be a swing guard. So by 9th grade, they had looked into it and they said, look, we're starting the whole girls league in Western Mass, which was great. I mean, so many great female players came out. Even to UConn, there was one, once that league got started, all these girls could try out. And we had I was a little disappointed, honestly. I was like, I want to play with the dudes. My game's getting really good. Now I have to go back to play with the girls. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It was a good thing. So that story kind of propelled me. Like in high school, I was still I was always motivated by academics, but I knew I wanted to keep playing basketball. And the reason I kept going out for the team was that it gave me more chances to play. But then I was getting recruited by these higher Division 1 and 2 schools. And I'm like, I'm just not big enough. I'm just barely 5'8", technically not even, but close enough to say yes, 5'8".
You're tall nun. You're definitely.
Definitely in India, I'm a tall white nun. And there's not many others like me, but yes.
Stand out.
But back then it was like, yeah, maybe Division 3 is the way to go and really focus on academics. And I hadn't heard of Bates, but my junior year, once I was at a big college fair at the Springfield Civic Center, and someone from Bates College at the table was like, hey, do you want to come and talk to us? This is a true story. And I was like, yeah, okay, you know, and I was thinking a little bit like Smith or Mount Holyoke, because that's Western Mass where I grew up, that's what these colleges were there. And then American International College, which is like a Division II basketball school. The coach there was one of my coaches at UMass basketball. And she's like, look, I want you to come. I'll give you a full scholarship. So I had kind of some offers then some other bigger schools like Seton Hall and places I didn't know about that were
Oh,
Division I were like, you know, we'll give you a Division I scholarship if you come full school. And I was like, I don't know, you know, what if I don't want to play basketball? What if I sit on the bench the whole time? Will I still get the scholarship?
yeah.
So I went over and I started talking to Bates, and they're at this college fair, and they're like, look, you know, do you do extracurricular? Are you an athlete? And at that point I was like, yes, you know, I played these 3 varsity sports, but I only want to play basketball. So they're like, look, can we send you more information? And I liked the look of the school. I was like, oh, Maine. I never thought about going up to Maine. So they sent all this nice information from Bates. I remember it was such a big deal because they sent this VHS, which most people don't even know what that was, but these are like early, way before DVDs got sent out. They sent a VHS film of the college. In my house, we didn't even have a VHS player. I remember I ran up the street to my best friends. I was like, Debbie, look what the college sent me. I want to look at this. And then it looked so beautiful. I went back to my family and my mother and stepfather. I said, look, will you take me up to look at this school? They're asking me about basketball and the academics look really good. So I want to go up there and interview with them. So that year in the fall, we went up to in the fall of 83, we went up to Lewiston and to Bates. And I thought, wow, it was really the people at first were so nice. Mm. And, you know, I had such a nice interview with Lee Campbell and with Bill Hiss, who I'm still friends with, you know, who was the dean of not dean of students, but he was in admissions. And I said, you know, I don't have a lot of financial money, and I know you don't give athletics, but my academics are strong. And they said, well, you know, the coach is really encouraging us, and if you really like it here, we're going to see what we can do to help you come. You can take, you know, we'll give you academic scholarship. Maybe you can take some loans. So just apply. If you're interested in us, we're interested in you. And so I'm looking at the college and I'm feeling like the people are so nice. I mean, you know, because you've gone with Adrian to the reunions, like the people are just so tight, you know? Yeah. And so, but this is true, Kirk. This is revelatory to my mindset at this point in my life. I'm, you know, 17 or 18. And I walk into the gym at Bates, you know, this little tiny gym. And I'm meeting then with the coach, and she's like, oh, it's so great you're interested, and we'd love to have you come. And I said, well, what was your season like last year? She said, well, if you would come, you would really help us rebuild. And you know, when a coach says that to you, it's not going to be good news. They were 0-13.
No.
I was like, oh, God, what is that? You know, like, I don't know if I want to play for 0-13. Then I said, well, you know, look, well, can we go see the gym? She's like, oh, this is our classic and historic gym. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. It's smaller than the practice gym at Smith College. You know, I'm like, my high school is a Division I, so I'm used to playing in this really big forum. And my ego was like, you're not playing here. No way.
That is so true. It was sort of foreshadowing of the mindset to come around, you know, sort of the glitz and the glam versus, you know, the experience of it all.
You know, I'm much more used to like Bowdoin's gym, which even Bowdoin College's gym is smaller than the high school gym I was playing at. So I don't know, my, you know, teenage mind in the 80s was like, I don't think I'm going to bite the bullet for this, you know, I mean, at least Division II. But then when I had the meeting with the coach, I was like, you know, what are you really coming here for? And I saw, really honestly, I saw the library. They had just built a new library. I loved the library. I was like, really, what are you coming to college for? And when I got back to Holyoke and thought about it, they had these 2 cycles, one early admission 1 and then later admission, early admission 2. So I followed up with some other schools who were recruiting and went to look at Boston College. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to be my scene. It's very Jesuit Catholic and a very big party school too. And I was really like, didn't know that Bates was such a party school, and ends up it is a bit of one. But I don't know, somehow when I got back and looked at all my options, I was like, I think I'm going to apply for the second round early decision to Bates because it gave me the best feeling. And I was like, you know, so yeah, the gym's small and they didn't have a winning season, but maybe there is some reason that this was a good connection. And honestly, this is the funniest part. in some ways of the whole story. I love the color of Bates, which
Now
is
you're
this
wearing,
color. They wear black now. I don't know why everyone in the US has gone to black. We've got to get our colors back. Get out of black. Get out of black. Get back to the colors, the light, the upbeat, full spectrum of the
yes,
rainbow.
what
Got
is
to
it? Is it
reclaim them.
garnet? It's
But
like,
it's a garnet color. Yes, it's this color of crimson garnet, and which ends up being this robe color that I'm very drawn to. It was Bates traditionally had this red garnet color with white, and I was like, oh, I like the color of that uniform. I don't know why these things kind of struck my mind, but I was like, oh, the school color is really nice. And yeah, and I really, beyond that, I really like the people a lot. So I'm just going to apply early decision the second round. And luckily enough, I got in. I still remember the day. I mean, it was a big, big deal because out of my parents' families, only my mother and father from their families had ever gone to college, and they went to the state teachers college. So for me to go for something like Bates was like quite unusual, like no one had gone to such a private college. And they were both, although my parents were divorced, they're like, yes, go for your dream and we'll do our best to help you in whatever way we can. So that's how I got to Maine.
wow. So then you go through your college experience, and then basically you're living this sort of traditional American life for many years. And then at what point does it kind of cross your mind to say maybe I should consider a different path?
Well, my time at Bates, actually, I had been meditating since I was about 10 years old.
Oh,
So
really?
I had done something when my first time, I mean, when I was very young, when I was 6, I used to go out in the backyard where I grew up in South Hadley into these little woods that we had. And I built these little huts that were my forts. I called them my forts. And I would just be out there. I don't remember doing anything. I wasn't particularly reading books. I was just sitting in the nature, sitting in this little hut, this little fort that I built. I like to build things. And then I would just be very happy out there. And then when we moved, when I was about 10 or 11, we moved to Holyoke. I do remember specifically in my new room sitting one day, just sitting and listening deeply and thinking, what is going on here? Like life has changed very quickly, but who is listening right now? Like really paying attention to consciousness. And really, I wasn't asleep, I wasn't in a dream, but I really thought, like, who's making rules about life? Like meditation, contemplation. I wouldn't say I was doing like some formal shamatha, deep Tibetan practice. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea.
Wait, how old were you when you were doing this?
Yeah, I was about 11, I guess, or 12 when this happened, when I moved to Holyoke.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think when I was 11 or 12, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like running around the streets.
Yeah, I mean, and I had some ideas also, like I wouldn't have known the idea of karma, but I remember we moved from a very simple neighborhood to this very big, like I said, I lived in the white bread part of town. It was actually called the Highlands. And there is a part of Holyoke that used to be referred to as the Flats. I hope that they've changed some of the references, but in my day growing up, this is what the language was. So the Highlands was really where the big houses, like we lived in a big enough house, 3 floors that had an elevator because there was an elderly lady who had put this fancy little elevator in for herself. So, but I had grown up in this very like 3-room, 4-room little tiny house on Hollywood Street in Massachusetts, in South Hadley. So moving to Holyoke to this big 3-floor house, I was like, wow, I mean, okay, so my parents divorced, my mother sold her house, my stepfather sold his so they could afford this big house. Like I'm just trying to put things together in my own life of what's going on. I'm having to accept that my mother and my father are not going to get back together. Like there was hopes of that at some point. I think every kid who goes through divorce at a certain stage hopes that their parents might come back together. And then I'm thinking, like, I wonder how all these people who live in these big houses, how they pay for them. Like I'm thinking about this. And so then I don't know if that would be the idea of karma, but I was just kind of like very curious about how my reality was unfolding, I guess. And so when I was sitting in my room, I thought, well, what do you think you want to do with your life? Like what's interesting to you? And I thought, I really want to find teachers who made a difference in the world, and I want to make a difference in the world. And so I went to my mother's bookshelf and I pulled out the biography of Gandhiji, and started And then I thought, and I really want to know what is truth, like what is true about this experience? And I pulled out Plato's Republic. Yeah, I was like 11 or 12, but I'm like,
Crazy.
I'm already being raised a bit as a Catholic and about Jesus and the Bible and asking questions. I had good friends who were from Italy who were nuns when I was growing up. So I'd always ask them like, why don't the nuns say mass, and why don't they get to be priests? And so I was always asking all these questions. And luckily for me, most of the adults I was exposed to liked that. So they encouraged it. They encouraged that kind of inquiry. And I loved, always since I was young, I loved The Flying Nun. I loved The Sound of Music. Maria von Trapp was the nun. Later in my teenage life, I met Maria, the real Maria von Trapp. I actually met her. My uncle worked for her ski lodge up in Vermont.
Oh, yeah.
So, so nuns had always been like heroines for me, because I always thought they just seemed so empowered and so independent in ways that were really magical and really pure. And I thought, wow, but I don't want to be a nun, because the tradition I was growing up in, like, they didn't really have respect. And I thought, okay, that's good, but none of the religions are really organized by women, so maybe I'm not going to end up like that. But still, I was meditating, and even at Bates, I would go up to, there was a little mountain called Mount David across the street from the campus, and sometimes people found out that I would go up there, and they'd say, oh, can we walk up there with you and just sit? And they'd tell me tell me their troubles, and I'd listen and, kind of give, what do you think? And give them some thoughts. But yes, and I did meet my first Buddhist at Bates. He was a monk from Sri Lanka, Nalande, and Bates people would remember him. He had beautiful saffron colored robes, this colored robes. He was Theravadan monk. And I took a religion course. I wasn't that interested, though, at Bates, honestly, to become a monastic, but I was deeply interested in the pursuit of social change through nonviolence and truth. And and in environmental issues. My first job after Bates was at the energy office for Cambridge, Massachusetts, working for weatherization assistance and energy concerns for the climate. But throughout my life, after that, I had worked with wrote the first thesis at Bates on HIV/AIDS in the 80s. I was very concerned by compassion and helping people and helping the society, helping the world evolve in very beautiful ways that, I thought we could do better. Like when I looked at the world wars, I thought, no, humanity can do better. We need to come together and really evolve internally. I had even actually at Bates studied in the Galapagos and studied Darwinism. Yes, biological evolution, but there has to be an evolution of the spirit. So these things were compelling me. Like in the early AIDS epidemic, it was very difficult work. There was so much fear and negativity, but my own inner resources, something happened very dramatically. My senior year in college, my grandmother's life was taken very suddenly. So I had to dig in and say, what do you really believe in? Like, you've been looking for truth and you want to make change, but what do you believe in? And so these Buddhist ideas of compassion, loving kindness, nonviolence, they were always there. But the interest in Buddhism per se wasn't there until, I guess, in 1995. I was living in Berlin, Germany at that point. And at that point, I was doing some photography as part of one of my jobs. And I met a jazz singer. She asked me to cover her show at one of the jazz clubs in Berlin. That was great jazz scene in East Berlin. And afterwards, we were, probably having a beer or something. And she said, I have a feeling like maybe you're a meditator. And I said, well, yes, actually, I didn't tell anyone that, but yes, I was still going off into nature doing that. She said, well, I'm a Buddhist. And I looked at her, and her name's Rita, and she's an African-American from Georgia. She's like, yeah, not everyone's a Southern Baptist. She just we were just laughing, cracking up. She's like, yeah, I'm actually a Buddhist. Would you like to come to my Wohnung, to my apartment sometime to meditate? And I was like, yeah, that would be great. So I went over one day for that following week. I rode my bike over and went into her apartment, and she opened up this beautiful console, and there was this whole beautiful Buddhist shrine. And she lit the incense. She taught me Nyomoho Renge Kyo. It's like this Nichiren Japanese mantra. And we said that chant a little bit. We sat and did some meditation. Then she told me her story of how she came into Buddhism. And we met and started meditating a little bit. I remember I moved to a new apartment. She said, oh, let's come over and chant and bless the apartment. That was my first connection with like really organized Buddhism.
Hmm.
was meeting Rita and sitting with her. Then I moved back to Northampton, Massachusetts in 97 and was at another media literacy workshop, and I met another lady, and she said, "Oh, are you Buddhist?" And I was like, "Well, no, but I've done Buddhist meditation." She said, "Oh, would you like to come and sit with our Zen group? We meet at Smith College on such and such a night." And I said, "Yes, yeah, that sounds great." So I started sitting a little bit with them, and then fast forward a few years, I ended up in Hawaii on the Big Island. My friends, I didn't know anyone when we moved there, but it ended up friends of friends were there, and we got in touch with them. They said, "Oh, we really get the feeling you'd love this Buddhist temple down in the south of Hawaii in Volcano. Before, why don't you do a trip around the island and you can stay down there?" And so when I got down to that temple, that was the first time I really met a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner. There was a Lama who was there as a chant master at the very small, simple, beautiful temple there in the jungle, the wet side of the island of near the volcano, but it's quite very beautiful spot. And we started chatting after every morning. We'd sit in meditation and he'd chant, and then we'd have a tea. And he said, "Oh, that's very nice timing for you because His Holiness the Dalai Lama was just here." And this is in the year 2000. And yes, I had heard of the Tibetans, but there was no lots of internet going on yet. And we started talking, and I said to him, "Well, what do you think of the US?" He said, "Oh, well, we really like it because, it's giving us lots of opportunity. It values freedom of religion. It values culture." And so, I stayed there for some days and then was teaching in Hawaii, still meditating, some great little meditation lava tube caves that I found in Hawaii. And then 9/11 happened, and I had no idea. I was teaching 6th grade at the public school, and I thought, well, I think we're going to have to just meditate the whole class, like just do some breath meditation and then just talk with the kids about what are their questions. And when I did that with this, I had 3 classes, over 80 students total, and they loved the simple in and out breath meditation. And I thought, oh, this is what I really want to teach. This is it. And I hadn't done my master's degree yet. So I finished out that year of teaching and then moved back to Maine and started looking for graduate programs in 2002. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, maybe you should look at Bangor Theological." And I said, "Well, it's a Christian seminary. I'm thinking more like Harvard Divinity School or something more." I wasn't thinking specifically Buddhist, but definitely not something Christian. But when I went to the open house at Bangor, they were so open about really wanting interfaith and letting you design your own program. And I thought, well, maybe there's value because of technically the US is a secular society, but it's very Christian Judeo influence. So why not learn more about where people are coming from that position? I wasn't necessarily wanting to be Buddhist at that point. I just really wanted to think about what can we take from the spiritual sacred traditions and apply in a secular way that feeds people without saying to them, "Hey, you've got to come join." What are the practices that are good? What are the practical applications? And so after I attended an open house, I thought, oh, well, yeah, I guess I'm going to apply to Bangor. And right around that same time, I met my root teacher, who was just in Portland giving a talk at the Maine College of Art. I saw his picture in the newspaper. I was like, oh yeah, a little Dharma talk. Let's go hear that. And he didn't talk anything that night at Maine College of Art about Dharma. He talked about a little school he had just been starting over in India, up in the Himalayas in his hometown. And then a lady who he stayed with in Maine jumped out and said, "If you came here for Dharma, come to my house this Saturday. We're having a whole day, 2 sessions. It's a potluck. Cook something, bring something with you. Come and sign up." And I said to my friend Lori, who actually also played on that Bates team with Adrian that one year, "Hey, I want to go to that." And she didn't have a car. I said, "Do you want to go? We can drive up." She's like, "Oh yeah, let's go to that together." And so that's when we went to the first teaching. And everyone at lunch was so quiet around this guy. He was beautiful. And I thought, this guy is so much fun. He's a monk.
Yeah.
And everyone's showing respect, but he was sitting like here at the head of the table and I'm sitting here, and you can hear the pin drop. And we had been already in a morning session with him. And all of a sudden I was like, I said, Geshe-la, how do you teach students at your school humility? I said, I just was teaching school in Hawaii, and even the 6th graders, they're using this language. And I said, I started to teach them meditation after 9/11 so we could at least have a practice to keep things calm and keep the mind under control, and they knew what to do so that their language would be good. And he started giggling. He's like, oh yes, yeah, well, humility, that's good, but our students don't need that too much. He said, but if they're naughty, sometimes we take them by the ear and pull them out of the classroom and just talk to them and remind them that they're, you know, they're not being good. I said, yes, well, we can't do that here. We can't touch them. He said, I know, it's most unfortunate. So then everyone was laughing, and then the conversation broke. And I don't know, then I just felt right here in my heart, I just felt like this is a really important person for you. You know, you've got to just, you know, not become Buddhist, but this is someone you really want to learn from. And then about 6 months later, I had started the program at Bangor. I got accepted, and I was starting. And my professor called up, and he had hurt his leg, and we were there were 2 campuses, one in Portland and one in Bangor. And we were driving up, and my professor was teaching alternately live at one campus, and then the next week the other campus. So he needed a ride all the way up to Bangor. He couldn't drive. So he called me. He said, are you driving up to Bangor? And I said, well, it's my friend Catherine's turn to drive, but I'm sure she'll be happy to drive you. He said, good, please come by and pick me up. And oh, by the way, I've got a guest speaker for this class who's coming with us. He was teaching world religions. And so when we pulled up to his house, who was standing there but the same monk who slid into the back seat next to me? And I was like, oh, Geshe-la, I'm so happy to see you. I said, I bet you don't remember meeting me, but I certainly remember meeting you. And then the very next heartbeat question, Kirk, I just looked at him and I said, well, how does one really know if one's met a spiritual master? And I was like, wow. In the back of my mind, I'm like, what are you asking? I mean, is this even okay? And he's giggling. He's like, oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. He said, well, I can't speak for other traditions, but in our tradition, there are 4 qualities that we have from our text that say the student should find the teacher. A teacher never looks for the student. The student, if they think they found their teacher, should observe him or her for up to 12 years. The teacher should have more qualities, more knowledge, and more experience in the Dharma than the student. And the teacher should never give up on the student. The teacher will always commit to guide them. So at the time I was about 36, and I remember I looked at him and I looked out the car window and I was like, oh, 12 years, that's a long time. Oh my God, I thought 48, that's really old. And I didn't say a thing, but these thoughts were running through my mind. And I looked back at him and he looked right at me and he said, well, in your case, maybe 7 or 8 years.
Why did he cut down the number of years?
I don't know, but all the hairs on the back of my neck went up because I did not say a thing to him. And I'm like, oh, he just plucked that right out of my mind stream.
Unbelievable.
You know, in hindsight, why I think he said that was at the time I was, you know, doing my master's degree. I was starting the farm. I was starting the Mama Tierra organic farm up in Bowdoin. My mother was still very much alive, and she was very Catholic. I mean, she was so Catholic that even me going to a Protestant seminary was radical for her, and she was not really comfortable with that. And I think he could see if I really took on Buddhism, it would not be comfortable for her mind stream. So, you know, within 2 years of that conversation, I was going up to his school to volunteer up in the Himalayas to teach meditation. He said to me, why don't you come and teach meditation to our students? Because I had asked him, do you teach meditation to your students? He said, no, they do that. They do know it because they do it at home. Every house has their own little shrine room that they know how to do that. But it's a good idea. You can come and teach them. And I was like, you know, I'm not really even a Buddhist, but okay, I'll come and teach them. So I wrote a grant and I got a grant to come and do an independent research study in India. That was my first trip to India in 2005. Still no aspiration to be a monastic, but slowly, I mean, right away in 2005, I connected with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I was up in Ken Rinpoche, up in Geshe-la's school and totally committing to his project. Totally fell in love with the village and the people there. They were the most pleasant, genuinely warm-hearted, happy people I had ever met. You know, I'd already done a lot of traveling around the planet. And I thought, wow, you know, there must be either something in the Himalayan water or something in the Himalayan Buddhism. So I'm going to imbibe them and see what I find out.
Yeah.
So slowly, I would go back and forth to Maine in the summers. And then my mother got sick, so I was around. And then maybe around 2000, my mother passed away in 2007. So I came back to India in 2009, maybe by 2012. So at that point it had been, almost 10 years since I met Ken Rinpoche, I started to really think about, yes, I was teaching mindfulness and meditation and people were benefiting, but my study of Buddhism had started to go deeper and deeper. And I had started the project in Maine. The Maine Mindfulness Project was just secular mindfulness, no Buddhism, but I was still studying Buddhism. And then I started to feel more compelled, like, wow, you have a good chance in this life to do something even more contributing than just mindfulness. Like if you took Buddhism all the way to full enlightenment, if this would be your one shot in this one lifetime, you'll never have better chance. You have connection with His Holiness Dalai Lama. You have a root Lama who's totally connected with him. You've made a connection with the Tibetan other masters and Himalayan peoples who are carrying this tradition. Why not go for it? Mm. And so, it was a hard decision. I mean, I gave up my farm and gave up all the trappings of, the sports car and the mountain bike and the road bike and the downhill skis and the cross country skis and basketball and my friends. And at that time I stopped. Actually, I remember I was with Adrian when I stopped drinking. I wasn't a big drinker at that point anymore, but we would meet sometimes. Our Bates Book Cats, our little group of friends that would get together from Maine and Massachusetts from our old basketball team still, actually. It was Goldie and Shragi and A and Lori and myself, like 5 people from that team my senior year out of the 12 people of the team. We were still that tight that we'd get connected. And we went out to, what's that nice restaurant? The Frontier. Yeah, I saw your daughter there actually the last time I was in Maine, a couple of winters ago. It was so great to see her. She was so mature. And so we met there, and then everyone's like going up to order a beer. And I said to A, oh, just get me a ginger ale. I'm not drinking anymore. She's like, what? When did that happen? And this was like in 2008 or 2009. I said, no, I just decided I'm not going to do it. Like I'm taking Buddhist lay vows and I'm going to totally give up alcohol and that's it. And she's like, well, I hope I get there one day. And I said, well, if you want to, you can.
What?
And I said,
the one thing you gave up that I'm not sure I could ever, of course, Ani, is my hair. Now,
the hair.
I mean, for me, Samson.
You have,
my hair.
You have such a, I mean, you do have great hair. You've got like the Patrick Dempsey hair. I've met Patrick Dempsey too. And, there's some kind of affiliation there. But I can tell you this, you both have great smiles and you look fine bald.
Okay. Well, okay.
No problem. I'm sure dudes have huge hair envy, but because you would not be one to be losing it naturally. But look at your smile. You look great bald, so you never have to worry about that.
I appreciate that. You're so kind.
You look better than me. I mean, I think the Himalayan nuns look far more beautiful than I do bald, but you got to just work with what you've got. So I go with a smile. I think, if I distract them with a genuine heart smile and sparkly eyes, and they'll forget that they're looking at, half the people here think I'm a man anyway because I'm so tall. I get to the airport and you have to go through security checks, frisking. There's the male side and the female, and I line up, and all the Indian ladies have this like gorgeous black long hair, and everyone's like, "Sir, excuse me, sir, excuse me, sir, excuse me, sir, excuse me, sir, excuse me, sir." I'm like, I know. Lady looks like a dude. It's not dude looks like a lady. Lady looks like a dude. But I'm in the right line. Oh, so very sorry, madam. So very sorry.
Oh my goodness.
No problem.
Problem. I mean, it sounds like you've sort of found this. I mean, obviously found this peace and happiness and fulfillment. What's the most as you hear my dog drinking his water here, but what's the most? Is
that Denali?
Yeah, there he is. He's over there.
Oh, Denali.
Yeah. Oh, look, he did.
Denali. Hi, Denali. Yes, I met Denali before.
Right. What's the most challenging part for you of being a nun?
Well, initially it was just getting dressed. I mean, the robes, I had no idea, how to put them on. And I remember right before my 50th birthday thinking, what the heck have you done? You can't even get yourself dressed in the morning. So, your ego flips out when you lose even that basic capacity. So luckily I had good support through my Spanish nun sister. She's like, ay, hermana, no hay de qué. No es un problema. Like, don't worry about it. So slowly, I got the hang of that. of course, yeah, losing the hair, you have a kind of, I remember I met one lady on the bus in Dharamsala before I took vows, and she said, oh, I heard you're taking vows, and I'm just going to be honest, it's too bad because you have such beautiful hair. You know, people liked, also I had, you know, like
Yeah,
I'm
that's right. I
Italian
remember.
also. We
I
have the
remember hair.
Italian gene for hair, Kirk.
The
You know, I had a
python
good,
hair.
like,
I remember.
yeah. So I said, you know, well, yes, but I think part of it for me was really letting go of attachments, you know, to my feelings of home, like my farm in Maine, my cat, that lifestyle of rhythms, you know, that you've got your place, and it's not always easy, but you've got community. I had really great community in Maine. To give all that up, give the title of my farm over for $1. I didn't want to try to sell it or make people buy me out, because it was my decision to follow the path. So to give up any kind of financial security, but more it was like having to move away from my family. My sister and my niece I'm still really close to, and they're in New Hampshire, and now my niece is down in Connecticut. But my main community, you know, like really taking a big leap when you're 49.
Yeah.
And I remember I met one lady, a pretty famous psychologist at a interfaith conference, the Parliament of World Religions, and she said to me, oh, are you having a midlife crisis? And I said, oh, no, not at all. I said, when you feel a calling like this, it's so much more profound than any kind of crisis. I said, I remember telling Lori, who's my partner at the time, like, I'm not running away from anything, but I'm really being called towards something. If you have a calling in life, whether it's a career or you fall in love with someone and you want to start a family or you want to start a business, those are kinds of vocations. Vocation is, you know, the root of the word means to be called to vocation. But when you have a spiritual calling, when you have a higher calling, it's really a sense of huge responsibility, because it's not like you're going to come and take robes and sacred vows. It would be like thinking, oh, I'm going to get married in Vegas, you know, and then you can just get divorced easily the next day and say, oh, that wasn't the right thing to do. It's not like that at all. I mean, here are the Tibetan people who were literally refugees and driven out of their country, who lost millions of their fellow country people through an occupation and lost thousands of temples and sacred texts. Their whole tradition, culturally, spiritually, of Tibetan Buddhism was under attack, being destroyed. And so it was like a very huge decision to think, are you serious about this? Are you really is this gonna hold for you? Can you keep those vows? And so thinking of it that way, I thought, then these other things are really not much to give up, because no one's forcing me out of my country. No one's compelling me to join this. Realistically, my life is improving because of this. And it could be something that if I'm carrying it, I could help others out of their suffering. And after all, isn't that what you feel like you were born to do? And so that kind of made everything else. Of course, I remember I took my sister and my niece on a little sail around Casco Bay. We took the postal boat where you can go to the islands and sail pretty cheaply. And I said, look, I've kind of made a very clear decision, but I need your blessing on it, because it means I'm going to be potentially moving far away for quite a while. And my niece, who was about 17 at the time, was great. And she hugged me and said, oh, it's so great, Zaza. You always know what you need to do and you follow your heart, and I support you fully. My sister, on the other hand, who was about to have her daughter leave for university, and now have her sister say, look, I'm going to leave for India for an unknown amount of time, for all intents and purposes, for the next years or decade, or who knows. She was weeping, but she also said, yes, I want you to do, but of course I'm just going to miss you. And so, leaving them and my cat, who had been with me for 15 years from Hawaii, she moved, my cat Kula moved with me from Hawaii to Maine. And, that part of it, giving up those ties that bind, you're not giving up really the love, but you're definitely saying, I'm renouncing, that this is what my life is going to be about.
Yeah. And do you ever miss like in like the material sort of comforts that we all
yeah
take for granted every day?
I mean, my first winters in India, I'm at a different nunnery now, but the nunnery I was at then, those rooms were much colder, and no one, to my knowledge, was using any heater there, not even the head of the nunnery who started it. And she was in her 50s, or her early 60s, actually. And I thought, well, I'm not going to get a space heater because she's in her early 60s. She's not using one. And I was freezing that first winter. And at least we did have like a communal kind of wood stove in our dining hall that everyone would go and like hug on this earthen wood stove that these Germans built. That was pretty tough. And then not showering. So there was hot water, but it was so cold that, you know, you wouldn't want to shower. So, and this was before, this was even, I used to do the saunaing and the rolling in the snow, but the air was so cold, you didn't want to plunge into and take the cold, or even a warm shower and then get cold again, because you would get sick, you know, so you would just have to get used to not showering for some weeks at a time, which, you know, for an American is a little tough because we're a kind of a shower culture. For Europeans, they're not. Yeah, I mean, Americans shower every day, at least once, and sometimes twice or three times. Yeah, but Europeans and Indians, it's not like that. So that was a little bit of a new, and then not, you know, things like not being in control of like cooking your food and just accepting eating what you're given, eating only 2 times a day. We only, you know, breakfast and lunch. We don't eat dinner. That was a little hard, especially when it was cold during the winter. I lost a lot of weight, and I saw my teacher. He's like, you know, you don't have to do that. Like, don't be extreme. The Buddha said you have to find the middle way. But I was like, you know, I met him and I had dropped, I don't know how many pounds, 10 pounds. And I don't really have those 10 pounds to lose. So my health took a hit at the beginning. That was a bit tough. And then the language, of course, because I was learning Tibetan to say the prayers. And when you really hear the nuns praying, it's like speed praying, and your tongue, you feel like you've got, you know, 4 tongues in there trying to pronounce things. And I speak German and I speak Spanish, but the challenge with Tibetan is the whole alphabet is different. It's a beautiful language and it's written like calligraphy. If you've ever seen any Tibetan, I don't know.
Yeah, I have seen it.
Yeah, and so just trying to learn that starting at the age of 50 was a little tough. But, you know, in the end, nothing was enough to deter me, I think. And I broke my head open right that first summer. I tripped on a rock. I didn't really trip. It was a weird accident. I didn't even slip or trip. I just went straight down, crossing a stream of mountain water and the rock wasn't even wet, but I was going across, and the next thing I knew, I was just going head first and just saw this huge boulder, and my head hit it here, and it hit so hard. I really remember thinking that could kill you. Like my skull split.
Oh my gosh.
And I was with my Spanish nun friend who had also just ordained, and she was like just hysterical. I wasn't crying. My glasses flew off, and I said to her, please get my glasses, because they're really special glasses. I knew I couldn't get them made here. And there was blood going everywhere. I even thought maybe she could see the bone. So I took my Zen, that's what this part of the robe is called, and I just put it up. She said, let me see, Herman. I said, no, está bien. And I was sitting on the rock. Then I showed her, she goes, ay, Dios mío. And then I was just calm. And later she told me, oh, you were so calm and you weren't crying that I just couldn't be a hysterical Spanish woman. I told her, please go to the nunnery. It was early in the morning on a Sunday morning. Go find, and then I decided to tell her, no, don't disturb the main nun. Just go find a taxi in the village. We just have to go to the hospital. So I had to get stitched up. So that was, I don't know, that was a kind of a blessing in some way that I lived through it.
For your education.
I mean, that I lived through. It was, it was some kind of an initiation. But I came back from the hospital with these 5 stitches with like this, they didn't have like a thin one. They had this like huge bandage wrapped around, and they had used mercurochrome or something, so it was all stained. I looked like a war injury. And I knew people in the village at that point, and they're like, Anila, what happened? What happened? I was like, it's okay, really.
Oh my gosh.
Well, so those have been some of the challenges. I mean, now with this epic of COVID, it's like, I don't feel challenged. Like, I'm so grateful to be here at the nunnery with Tsunma Tenzin Palmo, who's she's really a female master, but it's meant, you know, not being able to travel back and not knowing when I'll travel back to Maine, and just having to accept that. And, you know, that is kind of had crossed my mind already a few years back, like, oh, something could happen and you might get stuck on this part of the world and you wouldn't be able to go back. And that's part of the path, is that you just give those things up. And there's a beautiful line in one of our prayers that says a total absence, which means you have to be totally selfless. You give up any kind of selfish motivation, planning, total absence, lack of a sign. So you're not looking for signs that you've attained anything, lack of a hope or a wish, so you're not projecting anything out, and lack of an action to affect things ahead, which means you're just living right now. This is all you have. It's all we know that we have. And you're not worried about what's happening in an hour, in a day, in a month, because as my teacher repeated over and over again during all those years in Maine when he'd come, life is uncertainty, death is certainty. We do not know how long we have to live a life, but we do know death is coming. We don't know when. So live your life now.
I love that. That's, you know, I think a lot of us are sort of struggling in this time, and, you know, we're trying to get through, and we focus on what's not happening or what we're missing out on. But that is a really great, that's a really great, not prayer and mantra to kind of follow, you know, just sort of philosophy.
Yeah. Well, it's a truism. I mean, life is uncertainty. You know, I mean, we could, if you're in a country like India or other parts of the world, you'll see death all the time. We don't see it in the U.S. and the West. We hide away from the fact that death is happening, and COVID has made us really have to show up and acknowledge that. And we, as a younger culture, you know, U.S. is one of the youngest cultures on the planet, and yet we have so much power. We think that the whole world is like that, or it should be like that, and it's not the case. There are many older cultures in the world that have much wisdom to share with us, that accept, like in India, they accept that there are natural cycles to life, and that death is just part of the natural cycle, and it's not the end. It's not at all an ending. It's just as natural as birth, and that it can come anytime. You know, when people live in the conditions with less material resources, they tend to develop their inner resources, so that's what they meet life with. And it's almost just the opposite in the West, is that we think if we've insulated ourselves with enough money or enough food or enough toilet paper or big enough and warm enough houses or enough clothing, that we'll somehow be able to keep death at bay. And that's not true. You know, we really don't know how long we have to live any kind of a life in any lifetime. So we should be very clear about our gratitude for the life that we do have to live, and be able to show up like mature human beings that we are, to accept that there's uncertainty, but it doesn't mean we have to live with stress and anxiety. We have to be practical, and we have to be prepared, and we have to be realistic about what is it we can do, and where do we have to just release and say, in the end, actually, I'm going to show humility and acknowledge I'm not really in control here. It's really not going to be up to me, but I'm going to do my best to meet whatever's coming my way, with the best resources, with a clear mind, with a good conscience, with pure ethics, not harming, and the belief that we have to believe in our own capacity to be able to do the right thing, not just by ourselves, to ourselves or for our loved ones, but equally for everybody, because we're all in this together. And that's what COVID's shown us. It hasn't spared any humanity, any corner of the planet. Some people have done a better job at managing it, but there's not been one place that hasn't been impacted by it. And that is our way forward. That is our truth of the rest of this 21st century and forward, is the oneness of humanity and the compassion for all that lives. Nothing wants to lose its life. Even the insect, it cherishes that little life it has, because that's all it knows. But it's a natural truth of life to value it. You know, most healthy creatures, they don't harm intentionally. They don't go around killing others. They don't go around stealing. But human beings have these problems. They don't deny themselves that anything's going to happen or not. Maybe other animals don't have a capacity to do that, but human beings often live in a denial that life is impermanent, that life is uncertainty, that they're not, you know, people might try to find the way to stay immortal, but they're not. looking in the right direction. You know, they look more in these kind of biological ways to try to preserve the body, but it's the mind that makes life beautiful. It's not the body. The mind and the beauty of the mind and the inner values is what is in some ways going to become more immortal and eternal. And I don't want to say eternal, but some kind of deathless state that is within us. Our consciousness, our Buddha nature, we say in Buddhism, that's what will carry on. So in Buddhism, we believe in reincarnation and rebirth. That is a beginningless and endless quality that everybody, everything that has consciousness has a piece of that. There's nothing that can destroy it. It's deathless by its nature. The physical and biological aspects of the appearances that we're taking in this one particular lifetime, those things change all the time, but that's in their nature. I mean, cells come together and cells change, and we're shedding cells all the time. We're shedding our skeleton all the time. Our hair's growing white. We lose teeth, you know, yeah, a little bit of salt and pepper going on in your beard there. And that's natural. That's also natural. That's what compound things do. Things that come together are compound. Our planet at some point was not in this form. It was compounded of materials, of heat, of stone, of fire, of forces, and then cooled off, and then water came, and then earth emerged. And it's a process. But because it compounded out of space, eventually it will decompose back into space. But space is much more like our mind. Our mind is non-physical. Our mind is beginningless and endless. No one to date has ever been able to find the mind. The mind isn't the brain. The brain is an organ, but the mind is that which knows. The mind is pure, intelligent awareness. So that it's like space in the sense where there's no boundaries and it's non-physical, but nothing can destroy it either. You know, we might have problems with our mind. We might have bad habits that make our mind not happy or not make good decisions or create addictions, but those are not part of the nature of mind. Those are just parts of habits. Those can be changed.
Mm. That was amazing.
And so my point, what I want to say about this COVID part, Kirk, is that what I think we can do now in the West is it is amazing, and it is true. If you look at it realistically, you can find the truth yourself. You don't have to believe it just because Tenzin Dasel is saying it, and you don't have to believe it because the Buddha discovered and found that. Actually, one of my favorite quotes of the Buddha that drew me to Buddhism was, his quote was, "Believe nothing, no matter who has said it, even if I myself have said it, unless it accords with your own knowing." And then end quote, the Buddha. And I thought that's a teacher I can follow, because total confidence. They're saying, don't believe it because I'm saying it. Check it out for yourself.
Right.
And this is also why Albert Einstein said, if there is a tradition of philosophy, what His Holiness is calling a science of the mind, that would fit with the 21st century nicely with science, it's Buddhism, because there is this sense of a deep investigation, of analyzing and looking. What do you know that you can say for sure you know is true from your own experience, and then hold up what the teachings are against that, and then, you know, see for yourself. So I like it. I think that's really positive, and there are still reasons that this 2,600-year-old tradition is still applicable and still thriving today.
Absolutely.
And because of its fearlessness to look at impermanence, you know, that death is another way to say impermanence, that it's a natural thing. It's not something we have to be afraid of. And if anything, COVID can show us how precious life is, that none of this almost 500,000 people in the US, which I'm so deeply, deeply troubled and sorry to hear about. And we're saying prayers here all the time at the nunnery for all mother beings to be free of suffering and to have happiness. But if there's anything that the way the COVID's really impacted the United States society, it's showing us that life will not last forever, and that we do have challenges that we're going to need to come at in a whole new and healthier way, that remind us of the indomitable human spirit, the capacity to rise in these moments of challenge. And that is by coming together, uniting, and calling on our best resources, which are internal resources.
Well, that seems like a great place to wrap up, Ani.
Okay, good. That sounds like a good wrap to me.
That's
where I begin, and that's where I end.
We covered a lot of ground. Oh,
Happily so. Thank you for letting me share your morning cup of coffee with you. You're probably ready for another one by now.
now I'm gonna take Denali for a walk, uh,
Oh, nice,
and
nice.
continue to think about all that you've enlightened here for me today. And but this has been awesome. It's so great to catch up, and hopefully at some point when COVID settles down, you're back in Maine, and we can go play some one-on-one.
Oh yes, you'll have a hard time defending my hook shot. When I was in Hawaii, I played against a guy, one of my teaching colleagues, who was 6'4", and I could kind of loft the hook shot. He said his nickname in high school was the Terminator because he was such a good shot blocker. So I just threw a nice lofty high hook up and over.
Love it.
It's been a while though, so you have a good chance.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kirk. It's been my pleasure to chat with you. And yes, let's be in touch about many things that we touched upon, both for the podcast and also for the Tashi Gatsel Ling Buddha Center to see. Would you be willing or able at some point, if we have a little Zoom meeting online, would you pop in and join sometime with us to meet the other board of directors?
Yeah, sure.
They would like that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. How many years do I have out of the 12 years, Ani? I got 15.
Well, my question for you is, are you really looking for a teacher?
Oh, well, yes.
Yeah.
That's a good question to start with, isn't it?
Yeah. And so just work with that and then say, well, I'm looking for a teacher, and what do I want from that teacher? And you know yourself. I think, knowing you a little bit, I think you still want independence and some capacity to guide your own journey, which is good. So you think then also you have to decide, what are your core beliefs already? Like if you're a theist, then Buddhism's not really a good path because we don't believe in a God. Buddha's definitely got wisdom and guidance, but was a human being and became awakened. Buddha just means awake, and that's a different thing than a God. If you're a theist, then you need to think, well, who do I think is a good theistic teacher? Who could I follow? If you believe in a creator God, then so go at it from who you know yourself to be and where you think you need to keep going.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then we'll talk again.
All right.
But also, you please give that lovely wife of yours a big warm hug from me, and
I will.
sending lots of prayers and greetings to her. And yes, I'll be really happy to have a nice visit in your lovely space when, hopefully in not too long, when I'm back either later this year or in 2022.
Wonderful.
And let me know about the podcast when you're going to put it up.
Yeah, I got to work on it. I'll edit it down a little bit, and I'll post it. Where would you listen to podcasts? Like I could send you the web link, or do you do like Apple Podcasts or whatever?
Well, honestly, I don't have that much time that I've listened to them, but I do listen to them when people send them to me. So if you send the web link, I'd have Tashi Gatsel Ling put it up on their website, and okay. I'd listen to it that way.
Yeah, I'll send
that's a possibility.
Link. Yeah, I have it hosted on a website, so I'll send that.
And if you've recorded this whole Zoom session, if you're okay with it, then we'd put the whole thing up as a Zoom session.
Oh wow, on your website.
Yeah, there's someone started a YouTube one that they like to put anything I'm doing up on. I don't do it myself, but I'd send her the link. If you have this, you don't have to edit it or anything. I just let it go. I just let it go up raw because people say, no, we just want to hear, they somehow they like something. So
sure, I'd be honored.
Oh, good. Nice. Thank you. Because I'm not, I'm working for Tsunma here at the nunnery, doing like her Facebook page and doing clicks around some short videos, but I'm not doing too much like this, but people keep saying, like, if you have something, please put it up. So
yeah, that's great. Okay.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, brother.
All
Take
right,
good care. Stay
care.
healthy.
Great to see you.
You too. You too.